"Hey, you missed a spot, loser." The voice was sharp, dripping with arrogance. Gerald Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, leaned back in his luxurious leather chair as he sneered at the janitor scrubbing the marble floor near his office. The massive corporate building gleamed with wealth, but to Gerald, some people would never belong in such an environment, especially people like him. The janitor, an older Latino man with graying hair and calloused hands, barely looked up. He continued cleaning, his expression calm, almost amused. "I said, you missed a spot," Gerald repeated, louder this time. The employees nearby froze. Everyone knew the CEO's temper was unpredictable, and no one wanted to be on the receiving end of his wrath. The janitor finally stood up, adjusting his uniform. His name tag read Miguel. He locked eyes with Gerald, his gaze unwavering. "I'll get to it," he said simply. Gerald scoffed. "That's the problem with you people. Always so slow, no work ethic." A few gasps echoed in the hall. A young intern, clutching a stack of files, nearly dropped them in shock. No one dared to speak up. Miguel remained unfazed. Instead of reacting, he gave a small smile. "Hard work always pays off in the end," he murmured before returning to his cleaning. Gerald rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Just don't get in my way." With that, he turned and stormed into his glass-walled office, leaving behind an air of uncomfortable silence. What Gerald didn't know was that the janitor he had just mocked wasn't just a janitor. He was the secret investor who owned 40% of Whitmore Enterprises. And soon, Gerald was about to learn the hard way. Later that afternoon, Gerald strode into the sleek boardroom of Whitmore Enterprises, exuding his usual arrogance. The walls were adorned with framed awards, stock market charts, and a portrait of himself, because, in his mind, he was the company. The senior board members sat around the long glass table, murmuring about something. Gerald frowned. He didn't like when people talked without him. "All right, what's with the whispering?" he demanded, slamming his expensive briefcase onto the table. An older board member, Richard Hastings, cleared his throat. "Gerald, we've been meaning to discuss something important regarding one of our investors." Gerald rolled his eyes. "Let me guess, some idiot wants to pull their money?" "They can get lost. We don't need weak investors." Richard shifted in his seat. "Actually, this investor has been increasing their stake quietly over the past year. They now own 40% of the company." A stunned silence filled the room. Gerald's jaw clenched. "What? Who? Why didn't I know about this?" Richard glanced around nervously before sliding a file across the table. "Their identity was kept private, but we'll be meeting them in person soon." Gerald grabbed the file, scanning the pages. His eyes narrowed. "Miguel Santiago? Who the hell is that?" One of the executives cleared her throat. "Sir, that's the janitor." The room fell deathly silent. Gerald blinked, then laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You expect me to believe that? Our company's second biggest investor is a janitor?" Richard sighed. "Believe it or not, it's true, and he's requested a private meeting with you." Gerald's face turned red with fury. "This is some kind of joke. I'm not meeting with a damn janitor." But deep inside, for the first time in a long time, Gerald felt something he never thought he would: fear. Gerald paced his office, his hands clenched into fists. His mind was racing. How the hell could a janitor be an investor, let alone a major stakeholder? There had to be some mistake, a prank, a fluke. But when his secretary knocked and hesitantly said, "Sir, Miguel Santiago is here to see you," Gerald knew he couldn't avoid this any longer. "Send him in," he snapped, straightening his tie and forcing himself into his usual dominant posture. The door opened, and Miguel walked in, not in his janitor's uniform, but in a tailored navy blue suit. His demeanor was calm, confident. If Gerald had thought the man looked out of place in the office before, now he commanded the space. Gerald's smug smirk faltered. Miguel took a seat across from the CEO, clasping his hands together. "Nice office," he said, glancing around. "I've spent years cleaning it. Never thought I'd sit here for a business discussion." Gerald forced out a laugh. "All right, let's cut to the chase. What kind of game are you playing?" Miguel tilted his head. "No game. I've been quietly investing in Whitmore Enterprises for years. I believe in this company. Unfortunately," he gave Gerald a knowing look, "I don't believe in its leadership." Gerald stiffened. "Excuse me?" Miguel leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You don't respect your employees. You look down on people you think are beneath you. You think power comes from titles, but it comes from respect, and right now, you have none." Gerald gritted his teeth. "You think you can come in here and tell me how to run my company?" Miguel smiled. "You mean my company?" Gerald's stomach twisted. "I own 40% of this company, Gerald, and I've been talking to the other board members. Let's just say they're open to new leadership." The CEO's face turned pale. For the first time in his career, Gerald Whitmore wasn't the most powerful man in the room. Gerald could feel his grip on power slipping. His hands tightened into fists beneath his desk, but he forced himself to keep his voice steady. "You think the board is just going to hand you control?" He sneered. "I built this company from the ground up. You're just a janitor who got lucky with investments." Miguel chuckled softly. "See, that's your problem, Gerald. You still think my success is luck, but I've been working harder and smarter than you ever have." Gerald shot up from his chair. "I won't let this happen." Miguel leaned back in his seat, unfazed. "It's already happening. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. They'll decide if you're still fit to lead. And from what I've heard, they're not happy with your leadership." Gerald's heart pounded. He needed to act fast. Alone in his mansion, Gerald poured himself a glass of scotch, his mind racing. He wasn't going to let some janitor take everything from him. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Frank, I need you to dig up dirt on Miguel Santiago. Anything. I don't care what it takes." The private investigator on the other end hesitated. "That might be tricky. He's got a clean record." Gerald slammed his glass down. "Then find something. Nobody's that clean." He ended the call and exhaled shakily. Tomorrow, at the board meeting, he would destroy Miguel Santiago. At least, that was the plan. The next morning, the boardroom was filled with an unusual energy. Whispers, exchanged glances, and a thick tension that settled over the long mahogany table. The board members, a mix of seasoned executives and investors, were already seated when Gerald strode in, forcing a confident smirk. But when he saw Miguel standing near the head of the table, cool, composed, as if he belonged there, Gerald felt his stomach tighten. "Let's get this started," Gerald said, taking his seat. "I believe there's been some confusion about my leadership." Miguel remained standing, clasping his hands. "No confusion at all, Gerald. We're here to discuss the future of this company and whether you should still be a part of it." Gasps rippled through the room. One of the senior board members, Evelyn Carter, adjusted her glasses. "Gerald, we've received numerous complaints about your leadership style, your treatment of employees, your disregard for company culture," she sighed. "Frankly, your behavior has been damaging." Gerald scoffed. "Oh, come on, you're taking his side? This man was a janitor just months ago." Miguel finally spoke, his voice steady. "And yet, I've done more for this company than you have in the past 5 years." He turned to the board. "I've been quietly increasing my investments, securing deals that Gerald never even considered. Some of you in this room already know. I've helped stabilize our stock prices and negotiated contracts that saved millions. I've been a silent force for this company, and I did it all while being dismissed by the man in charge." The room fell silent. Gerald felt a bead of sweat form on his brow. He needed a way out of this. "All right, enough with the speeches," Gerald smirked. "Because I did my own research on you, Miguel, and guess what? I found something interesting." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" Gerald pulled out a file and tossed it onto the table. Miguel Santiago, real name Miguel Hernandez Santiago, immigrated here as a child, struggled financially, and, get this, his family had ties to criminal activity in the past. Some secret investor we have here. A murmur spread through the boardroom. Miguel didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly opened the file, scanned its contents, and chuckled. "You're really grasping at straws, aren't you?" he said, looking Gerald dead in the eye. "Yes, my family struggled. Yes, my father made mistakes, but I've built my own path. You, on the other hand, are trying to hold on to your power with lies and desperation." Evelyn Carter cleared her throat. "Gerald, this isn't relevant to the discussion." Gerald's smirk vanished. "What?" Another board member, Daniel Cho, spoke up. "We care about business, Gerald, not about digging up someone's past, and right now, Miguel is more valuable to this company than you are." Gerald's heart pounded. Then Evelyn delivered the final blow. "We're holding a vote." Gerald's world started to crumble. Gerald sat frozen as Evelyn Carter continued, her voice sharp and authoritative. The board will now vote on whether Gerald Whitmore should remain as CEO of this company. Miguel folded his arms, watching the color drain from Gerald's face. Wait a minute. This is ridiculous. Gerald slammed his fists on the table. You can't just... We can, Daniel Cho interrupted, and we will. One by one, the board members raised their hands. Those in favor of keeping Gerald Whitmore as CEO? Evelyn asked. Silence. Not a single hand went up. Gerald's stomach lurched. And those in favor of his removal? Hands shot up around the table. Evelyn, Daniel, 6 more board members, even some of the executives Gerald thought were loyal to him. The motion passes, Evelyn said. Effective immediately, Gerald Whitmore is removed as CEO. Gerald shot to his feet. This is insane. You can't just fire me. I built this company. Miguel stepped forward. You inherited it, and you ran it into the ground. Security had already stepped into the boardroom. Gerald, Evelyn sighed, it's over. Gerald clenched his fists, his face turning red. He wanted to fight back, to argue, but there was nothing left to say. His power, his status, his entire career, gone in an instant. As security escorted him out, he turned back to Miguel, eyes burning with hatred. You'll regret this. Miguel didn't even blink. No, Gerald. The only thing I regret is not exposing you sooner. The doors shut behind Gerald, sealing his fate. The boardroom fell silent for a moment. Then Evelyn turned to Miguel. Now, Mr. Santiago, what's next? Miguel smiled. We build something better.